Welcome back to It Tastes Like Burning. This is Matt.
This is Jesse.
And as always, if you have questions, concerns, comments, theories, interrogations, litigations, you can find us at ittasteslikeburningcast at gmail.com. You can find us at Patreon, It Tastes Like Burning Cast. And then, of course, we're always on YouTube and a handful of other platforms. If you're ever truly vested in our success, best thing you can do is like, click, subscribe, or lick. And that'll always help out. Jesse, we have something on the docket today.
Yeah, we have a guest.
What do we got?
We have the very rare and elusive guest that actually reached out and we made it happen. Which is, I have to formally apologize to all the others that we've spoken to through the years that we have not made it happen. And we will. Like we figured out that if we just do it now,
Yeah.
there's a lot better chance we're going to get it done than wait. But we've got Chad Edwards with us, and Chad is author of a book, and we're going to let him introduce himself and kind of tell you a little bit about his book, and then we'll roll into the meat and potatoes of this thing, right?
Yeah. The reason for the reach out.
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome, guys. Thanks for having me. Yeah, so the book is Cheap Seats. It's available on Amazon, and that'll be about the last time I mentioned that. But so I grew up in Millsap. My dad he just retired in October with 42 years of service at Millsap. He was county fire marshal for a while, and he's probably visited your department to do an ISO rating.
Yes.
And so
thankful for his guidance and patience with us.
And so growing up, some of my earliest childhood memories are riding in brush trucks on grass fires with Dad, and much to my mother's dismay. I think it was probably about 5. And granted, with the caveat, this was the early '90s, so it's a little different time. This would never be something I would do with my kids, but it had to be done. And so, yeah, I grew up in fire departments, going to fish fries all over, barbecue dinners, and crawling all over fire trucks. And so when it came time for me to join as a junior member, I joined, and then I ended up serving roughly about 16 years. So I graduated from high school with the idea that I was going to be a fireman, a career fireman, and I got recruited to go run track at Tarleton. And so I went down there. I volunteered with Stephenville Fire Department, which was an experience and a little different than Millsap, but it was nonetheless it was good. But and so I graduated with a marketing degree, and life took a few different turns. I figured out real quick that I did not like needles, and that was going to probably heavily affect my EMT career. So I got into insurance, and I've been doing that ever since. But still volunteering when I had time. Answered a lot of calls at night and spent the rest of the day trying to figure out why on earth I stayed up all night sitting on the side of the interstate. But and so I did that up until it's been a little over a year ago. Our family had a house in Millsap, my wife and kids, and we've been trying to sell it off and on for 3 or 4 years, and never had any real success. Like we'd have a showing or two here, and it never really panned out. And so we, within a matter of like 2 days, we had 2 people come look at it, and both had offers. One was cash, and we had 45 days to get 8 years of stuff, and 4 kids moved out. So in a matter of a month, really, I resigned from the fire department because we were having to move into town, into Weatherford, and I knew my dad was going to retire in October, and so the timing was just kind of right that it was time for me to step away. And so I lost 2, and at the time I was our school board president, and so I lost 2 major kind of parts of almost essentially who I'd become, or who I thought I was anyways, and got to the point where we didn't have any. I didn't have any extracurricular obligations. I could, spend time with my kids and wife that I had really didn't realize it, but had kind of neglected the time and energy with them, and found myself just super depressed and unhappy. I couldn't figure out why. Like, I have everything going for me. I should be happy, and why am I not? And just and really started waking up at 2 or 3 in the morning, with the same thought over and over, and I just didn't get this off my chest. So I started writing, and I wrote and wrote and wrote, and woke up the next morning and continued to write throughout the day. And before I knew it, I had this manuscript, and thought, all right, well, at least I now have gotten that off my chest. And I met with a mentor a couple days later. Said, well, how's everything going? And what have you been up to? Well, I've been sleeping a lot. Like, what do you mean? Well, I've been up writing, and I don't know. And so I said, I don't know what I'm going to do with him. So he asked me for some details of what I've been writing, and so I kind of laid it out for him. And he's like, you got that's good. That's a book. You know, we all take leadership classes, read leadership books on how to lead, and there's not anything for the next day. Once you step down, what happens after? And so, yeah, that's kind of how the book came to be.
And it's called Cheap Seats.
Cheap Seats, yeah.
Right. So how did you come up with that?
So it started in the beginning when I was on the school board. I almost had this hat made to wear to board meetings. It's almost, and it was not the best intention. Almost as a like, hey, you're in the cheap seats. Like as a reminder to the folks in the audience that were showing up and screaming at us for who knows why. Um, so I almost had it made, but luckily I didn't because it was just fueled the fire. But as I was writing the book, that theme kind of came up, and I realized real quick that the day you resign, you're right back into the cheap seats. And so, um, and there's a different perspective from the cheap seats that you don't get, you know, until you're served and led and kind of know the behind the scenes. A lot of what is happening up front doesn't make sense. And then, you know, having stepped out now, I'll see stuff, you know, whether it's organizations or, you know, school boards in particular, and they'll do things, and I'm like, I know why they're doing that, but because I've sat in the seat and I know why that is. And so, yeah, so just trying to find a catchy title. Not cheap seats. That's a good one.
Yeah. So just my take on that, it's like if you're sitting in that seat, you have something invested in it, right? So you're invested into whatever it is in the process in the organization or whatever, and that's the cost of that seat. Is that time, that effort, your heart, your work, your soul, everything that you're putting into that. That's the investment that makes that other seat, not the cheap seat, right? And that's just how my mind wraps around that title and what that means. And it's going to be different from everybody. Right?
Yeah.
It's the kind of the thing about writing a book or doing any of this stuff that we do. It's interpreted by everybody some way different, right, man?
Oh, yeah. Well, the thing that's unique about what you're describing is it's one thing to have, I'm the perfect example of this, okay? It is one thing for me, who's single and has no children, to have an opinion on the school board, okay? Never been to a meeting, don't have kids in the system, I don't know anyone in the system, okay? But unfortunately, I get to have an opinion. And meanwhile, someone like yourself who sat in this position and then proceeds to get filleted alive for X amount of time, and whether you know me or not, I mean, my opinion, depending on how well I'm able of actually phrasing it or typing it out or being a public speaker, can actually have a lot of impact. And meanwhile, I actually have unequivocally no clue what the hell I'm talking about. And there is just a certain point here at where someone who's personally vested, i.e., has time in the system, time served, we forget to actually listen sometimes to those people. And then carry on to the theme of your book of stepping out of those positions and now being back in the cheap seats. I would argue in the long run actually is going to make you a better spectator for the next event. Because even if you don't necessarily understand their process, you understand that there's a process. It turns out that they're not just playing roulette, okay? And they're like, oh, okay, well, it's 33. What's on that idea board? Like that's oddly enough, that's not how it works.
Yeah, yeah. There's like with everything, there is you just don't get to show up. There's things don't just happen because people show up at a school to it's the first day of school. There's you know a year in advance process to get ready for that first day, and budget season, like that's the longest days and hours that anybody, and it's those are hard decisions that have to be made, especially in the environment that the Texas education or public school education is in right now, that every dollar, every cent matters, and is stretched beyond. And so those budget meetings and workshops are just very long. But yeah, to your point, that person that shows up, and it could be anywhere. Life's easy in the cheap seats. You don't have any. You're not vested there. You can lob those tomatoes up front, and without realizing that those people sitting up front, or the leadership in a fire department, whatever it is, like this means a lot to them, and they dedicate a lot of time and effort, and so they're not. It's funny. I always joke, like I had people that when I was running for school board told me how great I was. These that's a great idea. Da da da. But like the day I got elected, I became like my IQ dropped by at least 70 points, and I became one of the dumbest individuals on the planet. And so it's just funny how that works.
Yeah, the idea, everybody can be an idea guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
I consider myself an idea guy, but I'm also the guy that will execute that idea, right? That's the difference. What is it? What's the difference between the idea guy and the execution of the idea guy? A lot of time, energy, and effort.
Yep.
That's
Especially when you get to something as complicated as like an actual school system. I was just thinking about that just for a half a second. It's like even to be able to get a box of pens ordered, like I could not imagine the procurement process.
Yeah.
Like I consider myself a patient person. I would probably ultimately struggle in a system like that because I would absolutely lose it.
Yeah. Also, a lot of people don't understand budgets, and like people think they understand budgets,
Yeah.
but they don't understand budgets because if your budget's a bucket, and it's just all of it comes in and out of this one bucket, that's not a budget.
Well, with anytime you're taking the accountability that comes along with spending tax dollars is, I mean, everything has to be justified, tracked. Like you have to be able to know where every penny goes, and the places that don't, they get in massive trouble, and it just like to your point of like I've always worked in the private sector, and so like if I need pins, I go buy pins on the company card, and it's done, and I'm over. Whatever. I don't have to justify why I need the pins. I don't have to fill out a form and hand it to three people. But my wife was a elementary teacher at Millsap, and she had a sprinkler head go off in her classroom. Yeah, that's not the call you ever want to get. And so I get there, as all my friends from the fire department finally get the water off and are, pushing water out. And it luckily it was over one. It was only one sprinkler head in a corner of her room. It just happened to be over her desk, but she was a English teacher, so I had a ton of books. And so we started having to like inventory what we had lost to turn in for insurance and whatever, and we were at like $7,500 out of our pocket, not the schools, but on stuff that she needed to do her job, and so it was just like, holy cow, like how, and a lot of that probably could have been bought through the school, but my wife is impatient like me and was like, I'm just gonna buy these books, I need them, whatever, and so out of that we started the Education Foundation and also because I was like, we can't have our first year teacher thinking that she's got to spend and go through all this red tape to get whatever she needs. So, but yeah, 10 out of 10 don't recommend letting a sprinkler go off in a classroom full of books.
So, how long ago did you write your book?
So I wrote it in February and March, and then published June 1st.
This year.
This
Yeah, brand new.
Yeah, and normally, and I've tried to do this with some of the other authors that have reached out. I always, well, I want to get the book and I want to read it and I want to.
Yeah.
And of course, we went way faster than I could do that.
Sure.
And it would have ended up like 4 books down in the queue. And I didn't want to do that.
Yeah.
So having not read it, I mean, I understand I've read the description on Amazon, right? When you go to look to buy it, and I understand what it's about, but give us more of a sense of what you learned on the journey of writing it to come out with, like, you gave up these things, now you've rearranged your life. How did the process help you personally, and what did you learn from it that you think others will take?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing in the takeaway is, uh, when you step away from whatever, anything that you really find your sense of identity in, when you step away, there's going to be a period where the phone stops ringing. They don't call for, for me, I could go to my kids' event and wouldn't have 4 people come up and give me their opinion on X, Y, or Z. I could just go be a dad that was there like everybody else. And so, and at first, that, the guy I worked for, he current mayor of Weatherford, and he was a school board president before. But right in between, like us closing and me resigning and all that, when it became very apparent that I was going to have to resign from at least the school board, and I was really kicking around the fire department at that point as well, he told me, he said, "Hey, your phone's going to stop ringing." And one day we were just having coffee and talking about our situation. He said, "Phone's gonna stop ringing, and it's gonna bother you at first." And I was like, "Man, I wish my phone would stop ringing. I want to throw the thing out the window." And so, sure enough, it happened. And at first, I was like, "Yeah, they don't really care. Oh my God, we did all this work and this and that." And they were going to pick a new school or superintendent at the time, and so I had somebody that I thought could be the guy, and I lobbied for him. And I'll never forget the night that they picked the lone finalist, and I get a text from my guy, and he says, "Hey, thanks for all the support, but they chose to go a different way." And I had that split moment of like, I was pissed. I was like, "Why are they idiots?" Like, and start doing the negativity and the critic, and well, there must be a reason why. Like, they have gone through this process to find this person. So, um, and that was kind of like, my phone hadn't rang in a while, and then I just couldn't help but notice like how just, in the cheap seats I was, like my influence went like that. It was quicker than I ever thought. So, going through that and really trying to figure out, who am I now? What's my sense of belonging? And it really helped me refocus on who I am as a person. Like, I'm, husband, dad, and then everything else. And so I really had to look at, like, my kids are, one's about to turn 11 all the way up to 13. I had to look at, like, I've got 5 years left with those older kids, and 7, give or take, of them actually being home. What do what's worth taking time away from them? And I get asked all the time to serve on different capacities and roles and boards and stuff, and I really have to look and justify to myself, like, is it worth not only the physical time, but being on the school board and volunteering. My energy was going elsewhere, and so that's kind of, I've been able to refocus over this and into, all right, what is actually worth taking time away from my kids. And that's not to say that public service and volunteering is not critically important. It is 100%. But for me and where I'm at currently, I feel like my purpose is my family. And so I've really had to kind of pull back. And it's funny, my wife and I were talking, hey, got this, I'm going to go record this podcast. And she goes, it's funny, you wrote a book about stepping away from leadership. And "Oh, is this our new obsession?" And I was like, "Well, you're not wrong." Like, but I think we all have those things that when you
Well, yeah, but take it from a guy that can't say no, right? I'm the world's worst at saying no. Like I'll say no to my wife or my kid way before I'll say no to some other thing,
yeah,
whatever it is. And to the point where I end up on all these boards and I'm doing all this stuff and you know, it's insane the amount of stuff that I will just readily take on and and be somewhat successful at all of it, right? Rather than focusing in on one specific thing. It's interesting, and this is not a conversation that most people that come out of whether it's a board, school board, or fire department or whatever, like they they gone,
yeah,
and you don't ever get to have like a follow up. There's the thing in the
the
grocery
debrief.
store, right? There's the thing in the grocery store where, hey, how's it going? Oh, it's good. I'm enjoying it, and then you just keep on
Yeah,
pushing the cart. And so it's interesting. You take somebody like me or Matt that are so invested in the stuff that, and not saying I haven't lost a seat or moved on from a seat because I moved halfway across the state of Texas about 8 years ago, coming from Brady where I failed to say no,
yeah,
right, for 20 years. So I had 20 years of not saying no,
yeah,
and then ended up in Granbury as a oddly enough, it was to help my daughter, who was a rifle athlete. So Granbury happened to be the place in Texas if you were a high school age rifle athlete that you needed to be at, uh, and followed that for her. Of course, you don't not do for your family, right?
yeah.
I drove all over the continental United States hauling my kids to, oddly enough, big rifle matches don't all happen in your backyard.
Right.
They're spread between, you know, about 40 states, and and these are not little trips
Yeah.
that we had to do for that. But you still do all that stuff, but it's not like it's always there's something else that you're having to tend to at the same time, right?
Well, and then this is kind of the follow up back into this. 10 years, there's just certain people that are their personality, their disposition, you call it genetic trait, whatever you want. They have a tendency to be more than willing to take on challenges and roles. And the interesting thing with you to see is, and I think what you're doing, stepping aside with your kids for that last 7 year window, I think really smart. Uh, but there will be a point there where it's no longer cool to be around mom and dad, and they're going to want to be kicking down the door and away. And do you find yourself ultimately landing back in these positions of leadership, management, whatever you want to call it? Uh, I can speak for myself. Uh, it's always yes. I mean, it just is, and I can even go as far as to tell you kind of like what my actual motivation is behind it. Generally, I just get pissed off and fed up with the inefficiency of whatever I'm involved with, and I'm going to go in there and fix it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
And I had that same, it inevitably, it doesn't matter what I get involved with. Eventually, I end up like looking, I'm at the front and I'm like, how did I get here? But it's to your point of like, I just, that's always the thought in my head is like, how can we make this better? And what, and if I'm involved in something, I'm all in. I don't have that ability just to halfway or half-ass do anything. Like it is, we're whole ass. So I, no, I don't think that, eventually I will, uh, you know, get back into some form of public service. I don't know what that looks like, and I hope it's, you know, it will be down the road. But with this book and the doors that it's kind of opening, and kind of why I reached out was I really think it, you know, spent years in the volunteer service and have seen it forever. We're always recruiting. We're always talking about retention. How do we get people? How do we keep people? How do we, make our department the best? But very rarely do we have the conversation of like, all right, what happens with that, the former chief? Like, what happened? How do we? Because those can be your Achilles heel. Is that person that leaves the organization uh, on a bad note, and next thing you know, like they're the social media warrior that's just chopping you down at the knees, and they know enough to be very, very dangerous. And so, how do we help that person step away? And this is something that not only in the fire service, but every business where succession planning, like where you get the opportunity to do succession planning and plan for the future. It's a conversation I think that needs to be had not only from the organization standpoint, but from that individual. What happens, 6 months after you retire, resign, whatever, and you step away and in a project that you poured your heart and soul in hasn't come to fruition yet. Do you start posting on Facebook, or are you gonna start showing up at the fire station, or requesting meetings? Like, what is going on? So, I think there's some healthy, conversations that need to be had before somebody steps away. And so, I think there's, you know, we we do a great job of having the conversations of getting people in the door, keeping them. But I don't think as a at any industry, at any level, do we talk about what happens after. And so that's kind of the conversation.
And I also think that because a lot of times your identity is tied to this thing, right? And that's part of what your your book's talking about. Your identity's tied to this thing. And if that's who you are, how do you stop?
Yeah.
Right? You may be that 30-year chief that really is just tired, wants to do something else, but they can't let go.
Yeah,
Step away.
Nobody's going to do it as good as me.
Yeah, all those unfinished things that I want to see happen. Or the kind of worst case scenario, they're out of ideas and they're out of drive, but they're holding on to that title because they don't want to let the title go for selfish reasons. Right.
And it goes back to what you originally said. And I don't know how you would never be able to make it part of your identity because
you're putting too much of yourself into it for it not to.
But you're supposed to.
Right. If you're doing it right.
Yeah.
You're really supposed to lean into it. So when you have someone that steps away or is forced out without the exit strategy.
Right.
Like, yeah, no, it's a good point. Never really thought of it this way, but you're fundamentally attacking that individual at a moral fiber. Like, you are really throwing some pretty serious.
Oh, you think?
Yeah.
Yeah. I might know a little bit about that.
Like, it's a problem. And then the backside of it, because you hinted at it for just a second, is that when you do have an ugly breakup, whatever, it can go online, and you see it online, and it's like, oh, I know what happened here, and yeah, there can be a real hell to pay.
Yeah.
On that.
Yeah, because we work so hard to build good culture in organizations. Like that is, what I think the modern American organization is about having good culture, having people a place that people want to show up to and want to be involved in it. And nothing can kill it faster than a disgruntled former leader, or and granted, there's things that happen that we have to part ways with people, and votes don't go a certain way, and people lose elections or whatever it is, and those are but I feel like if we can start having that conversation within organizations ahead of time, that even if there's that bad breakup, the people internally still can see, hey, you know, that's not how it's supposed to go. It would be great if everybody just was able to ride off into the sunset and, serve out and, whatever. Eventually, I don't know, someone will die, like, and never have to give up the seat. But having that conversation ahead of time of, hey, when your day is done, like, you're never going to not be, like, there's still a big part of me that I see smoke driving down the road, and I'm like, oh, what's happening with it? Like, you can't give that up. And but helping them, or having the conversation of just, hey, what does that look like? This is always going to be a central part of who I am, and I'll always have a soft spot in my heart for the fire service. But what does that look like? What's healthy versus what's not healthy?
Now, unfortunately, I think the answer to that is highly subjective. Um, at the end of the day, one of the things that can make this scenario that we're talking about particularly bad is, for a lack of better words, and this has nothing to do with, like, in your case, where you're still relatively young and you still have so much time in the organization. But then we go to the flip side of the coin and we go to your dad, who had a truly colossal amount of time in the organization and a huge amount of time, energy, effort vested in this. And I want to re-emphasize the time.
Yeah.
Where, because how old's your dad?
68.
Good.
Good for that.
And
yeah.
so he did it for 42 years. Okay. I mean, just break that into fractions. Like, it's 2/3 of his life is this.
Yeah.
And the thing I remember about sitting down with Jeff at our station when we were going through our ISO planning was we were talking, and I just asked him about where his fires, and he lit up, right? I asked him about where were you a fireman? Are you a fireman? And when he starts telling the story, like, he goes from the business guy of this is the job and I'm doing this, and he lights up into,
yeah,
I'm telling my story of my department and what and so it was part of who he was and what he did. Like, absolutely. And that, I don't know, like, their connections are made in that moment, right? And it takes that stiff business thing and turns it into this, hey, you guys should really do this and look at this and be more aware of these things and
yeah. Well, and because he's lived it, like, there's it's not just theoretical. Like, he at Parker County, and we assigned as fire marshal. Just the advancements that were made during that time. I mean, they purchased 26 or 28 tankers.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's unheard of anymore. Like, purchasing that many fire trucks at the time, and I listened to the podcast the other day talking about how much more those trucks cost, and, like, what that would have cost today versus 2001 or 2000, whatever it was. Like, but yeah, and you don't get. I think you got 4 of the 5 or 3 of the 5 votes to get the county to make that capital investment without being passionate. And so, yeah, and we've had some conversations since he's retired, and he read the book and about, like, what does it look like? What's healthy? What's a healthy way to still support the organization? Because we still both care very much about Parker County SD7 because we have poured tons of time and energy into it. And so, if we're, you know, we'll catch ourselves from time to time just discussing, well, I don't know why they're doing this, that, or right. And it's like, we both kind of have to like, all right, they're doing the very best with what they have. And so, how do we help support that versus be the guy in the cheap seats that's throwing tomatoes and making their lives even more difficult? And so, it's not easy. I think us as just people, we have a tendency to lean towards negativity because
It's easier.
it's easy. It's much easier to be, essentially a part of the problem versus trying to figure out a solution. So I think it's not easy. It there are conversations that need to be had, and so I would love to start working on some of the like how do you manage how do you package this into a training that could be done in a leadership class with that stuff in May or there's I think there's a conversation that needs to start being had.
I
It's
would
bigger than SFFMA.
yeah, it's way bigger than SFFMA. The kicker with it though is that, and I'm gonna sound kind of like a schmuck when I say this because this is just the way I see it. It doesn't really matter what your position is on the organization. You could have just been a 55-year volunteer. It's it's really the membership that's been on the organization X amount of time. Now that could very well be someone who's almost 40 but spent half their life with an organization, or it could be hell my uncle. He had 50 years before he retired, which is insane. Uh, and it's just, for lack of better words, somewhere between knee deep and neck deep in it.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter if you were a chief or not. You actually
Yeah.
you need to be thinking about this.
Yeah.
I'm going to sound like an ass when I say this. There's a certain point of where your involvement with a VFD is a small part of it, maybe not out of the gate, is legacy material for yourself. It's just it.
Sure.
Okay? And it's not that you set out with that intent, but it becomes that. Okay? And the longer you do it, the more that's going to be attached to who you are as a person. And there's going to be a certain point at this where we don't want anyone to die in the fire service, whether that be old and gray or young and bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. So there's a point at where you have to leave the organization. And are we actually preparing people for lack of better words, retirement?
Right.
And you don't really think of retirement from the VFD as a thing. It's just, well, open the gate and let them walk off into the green pasture, and hopefully the sun's bright.
Right.
There's an act.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or a helmet or whatever, or
The
leather
thing that your dad has with his gear in it, awesome. It's really awesome. I did.
Yeah, and they did a great job on that, and and you talk about wanting to see him light up. Like he'll, have people. Cause I don't know if he's ever told you about his Christmas light display.
Yes,
and
I've heard of this thing.
He's got a Facebook page
It's
dedicated to it.
unbelievable. But he'll have, and inevitably there's, the random fireman will show up, and that is, he's like, hey, you gotta come in the house, and so he'll show them the firefighter tree of I don't know how many ever decades of firefighter ornaments that he's got from over the years. He's got one tree dedicated to it. But then inevitably that's in the living room, and so and seeing him, point out the different things, and you can tell, and just how much that still means to him, his service to the community. And it's funny, I run across people, and they inevitably ask, like, well, how's your dad now that he's retired? And I'm like, well, he still has his day job. Like, there's people that don't realize that he never got paid. Like 42 years of service, and we might have gotten a training stipend at some point. People just don't realize because Jeff's always been on the fire department, and it is funny that I don't think he ever served as Millsap's fire chief. He was always assistant chief or thereabout. So, but it's cool to see, and
But arguably, you talk about legacies and stuff like that, and you talk about a guy like Jeff. His legacy in the fire service is a lot bigger than Millsap, right?
oh, absolutely,
Like just what he's done outside of, and most of it had to do with his day job, right? In his time at Parker County and stuff like that. But his legacy in the fire service is way more than just Millsap.
Well, yeah, but if you take this to like the national scale, if you look at chiefs that you would call legacy chiefs, yeah, don't get me wrong, some of them are for some pretty kick-ass departments, but they're not legacy chiefs strictly because of what they did at New York City or
L.A.
L.A. or
Louisville,
Chicago
Texas.
or Louisville. Like, their legacy because they were driven to work and inspire and teach and coach and show examples of way outside of their own organization. Uh, some of it was recognized by other chiefs, captains, whoever, and just said, oh, yeah, that guy. We need him to interact with my people, which is, that's the start of it. Some of it is like a person that I think of, uh, that's kind of particularly in Texas, he's a known name, is Les Stevens down in San Marcos, who does arguably the best budget and finance class for any chief, arguably in the U.S. It's a fantastic class. Um, how the hell do you teach that class and then be like the single most requested chief in the United States to be able to teach that class? Because there's no one that wants to take that class.
right,
Like that is arguably right at the top of classes that people don't go to.
right,
And then they see who's teaching it, and they're like, "Oh no,
gotta go.
I'm going to that." They may have been to the damn thing 10 times,
Yeah,
and you're going to learn some 5 new things
yeah,
every time you go through it. Um, and yeah, your dad, Jeff, he had an influence like that in this area.
yeah,
He would have a real specific. He's got a great personality, disposition, character. One, that helps.
yeah,
Okay. Two, he's very definitively, with his full-time job, a hellacious resource to anyone that's willing to put the time, energy, and effort in meeting with him and learning the process. Like, you're a damn fool if you didn't do that.
yeah. And kind of what is as an organization. Obviously, you've been here at Granbury. How long have you been on
16,
16 and chief for?
2020.
Okay, so with this conversation in mind, like, in your opinion, what is that retired? What does a good retired fire chief look like? Like, what 5 years after you've retired, what do you hope that looks like?
Empty bottle and jug around every day. For me, it's real simple. And I'm actually gonna give a really bullshit cliche answer, but I'm serious when I say it. I just want the organization to be better than than one how I started it, and then I want it better after I left. Okay, so with whatever we've done with our organization, we've taken it X amount of steps forward. Don't stop.
Yep.
Keep going forward. Be a champion, a volunteer.
Yeah.
What is the actual litmus test on this? Is Granbury volunteer, and after I'm done 5, 10, 25, 50 years later, then yeah,
Yep.
That's the litmus test.
Yeah, and that's in a growing environment where the combination and the well, we just can't find volunteers. Well, clearly y'all figured out a way
Mhm.
to
Arguably, it's easy.
yeah. Well, it's like talking to Steve Decker or Becker at Crescent.
Yeah.
Like I had a conversation with him while I was still on the department. I was like, how are you getting so many people? And just listening to those guys talk of, it's incredible. Coming from an area where we are struggling to get people to volunteer.
Yes, but that's all self-inflicted.
Yeah.
It really is. It's just steps, and there's like clearly defined. These are the steps. Do this, and it works. Like, but there's that hesitation to that we've never done it
this way.
always done it this way, right? The trivia question: what is the second largest department in the state of Texas by membership? Volunteer department. What's the first? You should know this one because they're the largest in the country.
I don't know.
Pasadena's number one.
Okay. How many do they have?
175
Yeah.
members, 9 stations. They're a pretty good sized department.
Of a city of 287,000 people.
Wow.
All volunteer.
All volunteer.
Who's number 2?
Granbury. No?
Not even close.
Really?
Yeah. Crescent.
Really?
Yep.
That's incredible. Well, I always love when I see their posts. It's like Crescent Volunteer Fire Department responded with 7 brush trucks, 3 tankers, and a chief. It's like half the Park County. We're not getting their response out of half the county, and so yeah, it's always incredible to see.
It boils down to leadership, right?
Yeah.
It's leadership that makes that thing. Now, what happens when Ron retires, right? And Ron's retirement is going to be dependent upon his death. We're convinced of that, right? But what happens when that day comes?
Yeah, is that the organization ready for that day? Because inevitably,
Not.
we're all in a inherently dangerous. It can be a dangerous business, and so every call, whatever it's the EMS call, whatever things happen, and it could be our last. And so, to your point of what happens if he's not there to carry the flag anymore.
It is the billion-dollar question, but that's true for any organization.
Yep.
You take a paint department. It's got a great chief. Okay, beloved chief, very competent, recognized not only locally but like regionally. Good all around. They retired.
We'll take a job somewhere else.
Yeah. If that organization did not prepare remotely for that transition, and particularly when I say violent transition, I don't mean like the guns and knives getting out. Okay. But hell, there's a who was it? There's a chief. DFW area had a chief that was chief for like 34, 35 years. Opry? Capel?
No, Capel's chief wasn't there that long. He was there a good bit, but not that long.
Maybe in Plano. Was it
like large?
Okay. Guys, universally loved. Time happened. And I assure you, it's not like he was, still had black hair and no gray and like this was kind of a known thing.
Yeah.
And did you do anything to actually prepare for that departure? In their case, they did.
Yeah.
Okay.
And to take that like any organization, like let's say I don't know, you want to take a vacation, right? Heaven forbid, or you have to, you can't be at something. Does the department stop? Because
you should have asked this question: how many have you had since you've been chief? One. And it was a Thursday, Friday.
Yeah.
And a Friday, Saturday, Sunday. That's it. That's the only time I've had off in 7 years.
Yeah. And it's that whether it's whoever it is, fuck if as an organization we build and we have somebody that and that takes a level of trust, right? Like you have an assistant fee for if it's whatever, whoever, whatever organization like that next man up that is confident enough that can step in where if you're on vacation or whatever, just sick for a couple days, whatever, uh, can step in and take those calls and those questions. So you're not having to be on the phone on a vacation.
I will say this, Granberries, our organization's too big. Like, and it's just my management style. I'm not a micromanager. And I mean, you need to understand, I'm not a micromanager. Uh, and it's a lot of it is sectioned into their own operational capacities. Uh, Granbury, as of right now, would be perfectly fine for X amount of time without a chief because the organization's built to operate that way. Uh, you take the hard opposite of that. Crescent's a lot more dependent upon that chief setup that they have, which is incredible because of just again the operational span of control there and just the massive amount of people.
But I think you have to have, whether it's a private company or anything, you have to have that guy that grabs the thing and just runs forward with it, right? And so, yes, they're probably not today ready for Ron to step away, but man, their starting point, and they can start having that conversation and building out the systems and the processes to your point of like where if Ron does end up retiring or whatever, that they're okay. They're not. It's not the he's not the only one running calls, and because you see that all across Texas. It's like the chief and his son and maybe his brother are the three that like the pager goes off, they're answering it. Well, what happens if they decide we can't do this anymore or whatever? Like the calls, the emergencies are still going to happen. Who's there to step in? So
Yeah, that's where you've got it. I'd argue it's 100% of everybody should be able to handle it, but it's not. It's that 2 year plus person should be able to handle about 90% of it, right? Like you've got to build it that way. You've got to have the processes, and it's just like business, right? If you don't have processes that make it where you're not dependent on that one guy, right? That has all the institutional knowledge and has all those things. That one guy could get hit by a bus.
yeah,
Like, and then where's your business?
right. Yeah, yeah. So it's succession planning. I think this book and the conversation really fits into any succession planning. And that doesn't have to start. Hey, in 6 months I'm retiring, or I'm leaving in a month, or here's my 2 weeks notice. Like, if you get to that point and then you have to start having these conversations,
Too late.
it's too late. And so, trying to have those conversations early, start day one, and not saying like as part of our onboarding training with a new cadet of like, hey, someday, including that in all their trainings of like, but it's like, hey, someday, over the course, we hope you stay 20 years. But if there is a day where you decide to step away, like here's some of what you're gonna be facing. Like you may, experience this depression of like we hope that this becomes a big part of your life. We really do. Like we all want passionate members that are hard charging and bleed, our color, whatever. But someday that's going to stop. And there may be a day, with me, like I knew my dad was getting ready to retire, and I knew, with the kids, they're incredibly busy. I just was running out of hours in the day to be able to dedicate to training and to staying up to date. And so, but there's a day we were working right on the side of Interstate 20, and I caught myself looking over my shoulder way more than I ever. We all are aware that the semis are flying by at 8 miles an hour, not slowing down and moving over. But I just remember thinking like, man, I've got too much on the line with my kids to be setting on the side of this stupid road for a fender bender. Like it just in that moment I thought, man, that's not the mentality I need to have. This job is too dangerous to start looking over my shoulder, and so um, I miss it constantly. There's just especially this time of the year with big grass fires burning all over. I miss getting out and fighting fire, but
gbfd.org. Tell your wife I'm sorry.
she'll be pissed.
I think part of the exit strategy, because I was thinking about some of like our older members, uh, longtime members. No great shock here. We're all buddies with each other. So the gang switched from the fire department to the breakfast table and the bass boat. Like, that's a thing, and I think that's part of that exit strategy that gets a little under considered in this total discussion is, you've put so much time, energy, and effort into this organization, and then the relationships you build.
Yep.
Um, and are you able to maintain those relationships outside of the new norm for you, which doesn't involve the department?
Yeah. Well, and I think that's a really good point of like that having something for them. Like whether it's that breakfast club, right? Like they get together, and but think about how valuable that would be as a sitting thief to know that on Tuesday mornings at the cafe, this group of guys that have been involved forever are going to be setting it and being able just to go and check in and see how everything's going, and that group that can be your biggest cheerleaders. They could be whatever, but you need to fundraise whatever it is may be like in that group because they're going to know everybody else in that cafe, and so and on the flip side, like that can also be your detriment. You get that group of guys pissed off at you, there's going to be hell to pay.
Yeah, they could be wrath of unknown.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. To me, it's actually a really interesting kind of talking point, but discussion point. And, at the end of the day, I say it's a novel idea, but it's something that legitimately needs to be considered of how do you handle, because I'm going to argue they're different. A long time just firefighter, long time like captain, assistant chief, and then a long time assistant chief. Like, how do you actually handle going through that and getting some sort of, really the word I'm looking for is peace on the back end of that. Because they're losing a major part of their character, personality, legitimacy.
Right. Yeah.
When they either retired or they lose a position,
Yeah.
they get elected and voted out.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. So after I resigned from the fire department and the school board, I had a Mr. Joe Tyson. He's got a middle school named after him in Weatherford. He was superintendent, principal, mayor, all the above. And uh, Joe's not a loud guy, but when he talks, everybody listens. And so he came and we were sitting at my desk and we were having coffee and he said, "Pat, have you ever heard the story of geese or the lessons from geese?" No. And so I'm in, to tell me. And so he goes through the story, but he gets to the point of he said, when the geese migrate south, the the one goose up front doesn't lead the whole way, and that makes sense. Well, where does he go after his time up front is over? Does he go like, well, Kansas looks good. I'm just going to bail out here. See y'all later. But he falls to the back of the formation, and he honks, like he encourages, he pushes helps encourage everybody to keep moving in the same direction, and then he just stopped talking, and he just kind of looked at me. And I was like, oh man, like, whoa, okay. It's funny. I was an article for another podcast I was on, and it was honkers versus critics, and my wife was like, "You published something that said honkers versus critics," and I was like, "Yeah, but it's captivating, and to the point of like animals in the wild have a better grasp on leadership transition than we do as this complicated specimen that we are. Of it's not that hard.
That's for London.
Lions, they're a little different, but like the dumb bird that flies north and south, once or twice a year, whatever it is, they've got it better figured out than a lot of us organizations do, and so uh, that's kind of the conversation that I think needs to be had. Is just someday, what do you want to be? What is your legacy as a former leader, firefighter, whatever it is? What do you want your legacy to be? Do you want to be the person that's remembered as the champion of the organization, that when they left, they still, bled for the organization and were their biggest fan? Or do you want to be remembered as the critic, the guy that wanted to burn the organization down after they left? And so I think if we at least start having that conversation that up front, that I think it helps the organization as a whole.
I think of a lot of these situations and a lot of this stuff. I think the misconception of those in the general view of things that are paying attention, right? We talk about egos, and egos prevent us from doing a lot of things, and egos. There's a difference between having an ego for the organization and being the champion of the organization and having a self-inflated personal ego, right? And I think if you look at the people that have the ego for the organization, they're the honkers.
Yeah. Yep.
And the people that are self-serving, even in that capacity, are not the honkers.
Yeah. Yeah. There's do we need to feel needed in order to feel valued, or is it because it feels good, right, to be that patriot development, and you're there on that person's very worst day, and you're needed by the community. But why? Like, what is it? Is to your point of, are we feeding some insecurity in ourselves to make us feel better, or are we truly serving for the betterment of the community?
To a certain extent, I'll bite off on that. Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't believe everyone in the fire service is strictly here for the betterment of the community. They're not. And if you say you are, you're lying. Okay?
I
You're
think it's a component. Yeah.
No, it's a factor.
Sure.
But so's the camaraderie.
Yeah.
So's the meaning, the value, the purpose, a place to belong.
Yeah.
Like-minded people, the adrenaline, the excitement. I mean, there's 5,000 different motivating factors for someone to be in the fire service, and we haven't even gotten to like the different types of personalities that can and can't do this.
Yeah.
Because the fact of the matter is that while you guys were talking, I was trying to think of, like, because I'm a big analogy guy, and I'm sitting there thinking, like, I don't know how good of a fire chief Gandhi would have made.
Yeah.
Like, that
Yeah.
I don't know how well that would have really worked out.
Yeah.
Like, at the end of the day, there's just certain traits that you need for a leader of certain positions. I just and those traits are going to be universal, and they're generally going to make the same person. Now, the personality may be a little different across the board, uh, but it's still arguably the same person. Uh, but hang with me on this. So, the U.S. presidency, generally known as like a really terrible job. Okay, and I'm gonna make a joke and kind of a personal statement. There's only ever been one good man in recent history that was a U.S. president, and he was the worst U.S. president that we've had in the last 200 years, Jimmy Carter. Universally a kind, well-intended man, fantastic dude, absolute garbage as president. I mean, it's kind of the same concept that I'm trying to make here. And I'm not saying you need to be a crook to be chief. Okay, so let's stop the parallel. But again, you're looking for a specific kind of, again, it's not trait, it's not a personality, but characteristics that make chiefs, i.e. leaders.
But and Jimmy Carter's a good example, right? Because you look at his post-presidential life and like the Habitat for Humanity and all these things that where he got to pour himself into it for the betterment of a lot of people.
Sure.
But it wasn't life and death critical decision type stuff, right? It was on a different level, but ultra successful with it, right?
Sure.
That organization is today what it is because of Jimmy Carter.
Sure, 100%, and his legacy carries on through it.
Yeah.
And you can make that same parallels with, like, we'll go to a real nationally recognized chief like Salka, okay, New York City. Like, perfect example of this. Like, that, whatever you call that template, New York City, and they had enough guys on the department to be like, yes, you actually fit this template, and start dumping time, energy, and effort into that guy.
Yeah.
And to a certain extent, arguably the same thing even happens in much smaller organizations. Because there just is, you're going to be looking for a certain type of person to be chief, even volunteer. I mean, yeah, I get it. You maybe don't have we'll call it the career pull out of, but same thing. You go to plenty of small departments, and you've had a guy that's been on that department for 60 years. He's never been chief. There's a reason.
Yeah. Yep.
There's a reason.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean it's bad. It just means that he never had
not the right seat.
Yeah, just not the right person for the spot.
Yeah. And you try to force that, but it just doesn't work.
Yeah, it doesn't work. And then on the flip side of that guy that's been there forever finally leaves the organization. Don't think he doesn't have something vested in this. Oh no, if you were dead wrong. He has a lot vested in this. Yeah. And again, it is still his personality. It is his moral fiber. It is there's a lot. That time with the organization left an indelible mark on that individual.
Right. Yeah.
So, no, I think it's a fantastic discussion point. Trying to figure out how the hell you'd actually have the quote-unquote training on it. I think what you really do is just start by having this discussion, and you just have it everywhere.
Yeah.
And then, for lack of better words, you kind of figure out what, if anyone's, what's the word I'm looking for here? Not that they're going to have a program in place, because a program like this doesn't exist.
No.
But if you have the right discussion, you're going to find out that at the end of the day, it's going to be centered around individuals and the way those individuals still meet with each other outside of the organization.
Yeah. still finding that sense of community and belonging. We all that's part of the fun. It's like getting to go hang out at the fire station and with like-minded people and what how do we you can't replicate that. It's you're the Breakfast Club's not going to go hop in the fire truck and scream down Main Street and get everybody out of the way. I can go in a burning building, but
now I will argue this. Here's one facet of it that I do know exists, like ESD boards. Those chiefs and stuff get grabbed to get put on that. Like, and they arguably are at their greatest pinnacle of contribution at that point.
Yeah.
And it's not in the firehouse, but those decisions that they make.
Oh, it's huge. I mean, you look at an ESD that has a supportive and an ESD board that has a clue what the fire service is versus ones that don't, and it's
a really important distinction you just made there. So I have the luxury of being a sales rep in the fire service, and I have a huge swath of Texas. It's a really small list of ESDs that I would include that I would say are successful. Oddly enough, in my territory, they're all in one county, and it just happens to be 1, 8, 7, and 9, and they're the only ESDs in that county. Like that's it.
Yeah.
Like, why are they successful? And everything else is no, they're struggling. We'll just move on.
Yeah.
And a lot of it has to do, particularly with focusing on, I think it is 7 and 9. 1. Of course, 8 and 9 also have decent boards too. But all those boards have also had to deal recently with the boards changing too, and just getting WTF uppercut off of the, And it's nothing against these nothing against these new board members, but like if you're a lifelong truck driver, you have no actual understanding of the fire service
or a CPA.
Yeah, or
attorney, or and that's on the school board. Like that's the same. It's people have this grand idea that I'm going to get on this board and I'm going to change this and that. Or then they get in and they're like, what? Like the once you get there, it's like, oh, I don't have nearly the impact on a school board. There's
right,
yeah, but
council's falling.
Absolutely, yeah.
Oh yeah, no, you have someone with a God-given agenda, and that's all they care about,
Yep.
And now they get on city council and city management's like, yeah, it's actually not that big of a deal to add an extra plastic bag in the dog park.
Yeah.
Like, okay, so that's night one, meeting one. How about these things?
Yeah.
Like, what you do realize, like, we're a city. You do realize that we're emergency services.
Yeah.
You do realize that we're actually education K through 12.
Yeah.
And special needs.
Yeah.
And after school program.
Yeah.
And you're fired up over a coloring book.
A single subject.
So what about the other 19,000 things that we legitimately need to address today? The 37,000 things that we can't get to today but should, and then the 197,000 things that'll never get our attention but desperately need to be addressed, and then the 14 billion other things that we're going to be distracted with that are meaningless.
And so much of those things in those boards like that, there's only one right decision, and there's no, like, everybody knows what it is. Like, most of those things, it's just a procedural thing.
Yeah.
It's because you can't not do this, because if you don't do this, just start plywooding up the windows because we're done.
Yeah.
Right?
One, especially like school boards, they're so heavily regulated because we're tax dollars. But in an ESD board, they're also spending taxpayer dollars, and so there's some handcuffs on procedurally what you can actually do. On a school board, you approve policy and you hire and evaluate the superintendent. Everything else after that has a
statute.
yeah. I mean, and you can't. I get the call of kid's teacher did this. And I'm like, well, did you talk to that teacher? Like, that's step one. And if that didn't go well, you got to talk to the principal, and then because then I tell people if I get involved on step one, if this thing makes it all the way to a grievance, a level 3 grievance where we have to hear it as the board, I have to step out. Like, I can't be a part of that decision because you got me involved in step one, and so that's that kind of slowed those conversations.
Well, yeah, but this is true. We're gonna bird dog and all part of our
Fine.
This is generally true for any. I'm going to argue any organization, okay, where the general public is so naive to how any of this actually works, okay, and the my personal opinion is the more that someone says that they're informed, the more it scares me.
It's like the person that says, I know my rights.
Because I've had some whopper conversations before, and I'm usually really good about just sitting there and for lack of better words, grabbing the crayons out of their mouth, putting them in their hands, making sure the mittens have strings, okay, and spoon feeding it. But there's a handful of times, and both of these were public officials, where it's like it literally had to make this statement: "You are not listening to what I'm telling you. You don't know what you're talking about. You won't listen to me. I don't know who you're listening to, but you're wrong." Because when you get to certain things like a hospital district board, or a school board, or a city council, or a commissioner's court, or an ESD board, the library board, okay, the Dream Catchers of America board. The fact of the matter is that all of these different forms of organization, no matter if they're like officially a government or if it's just a hobbyist union, they all have a book, and it's got their general good golden woodchuck rules and policies and procedures and how to do stuff. Now, whether they follow that or not, that's up to the board. Okay? But if they're doing anything in their power to remotely follow that, okay, you are automatically in a completely different universe than the spectating public.
Yeah.
Because they don't know those policies, procedures, and arguably just historical tendencies of what happens when you don't follow that crap. And it can become this ultra terrible thing for everyone. The second hell, we're living in it in Hood County's hell right now, where it's like, oh my God, everyone is just going around throwing Molotov cocktails at anything they can just to watch it burn.
Yeah.
Not for any reason, just to watch it burn. And it makes for a particularly very unpleasant political environment.
When everybody suffers. I mean, it doesn't matter what organization you're in. When the example I would give our board was if we're fighting, like boards need to disagree on things, right? Like there needs to be. It doesn't need to be a 7-0 vote on everything.
Civil discourse, right?
Yes, but there's a way that we can discuss that's not, that's professional. And so if we model that to the community, or if we don't, if we're yelling, screaming at each other, and it's mass chaos and havoc, we can't fault the community for following suit, because especially in small towns and like like a school district is the lighthouse for that community. And so if the people at the top of that lighthouse are at each other's throats, and you can't fault the community for following suit. And so, on the flip side of that, we did get to a point where we had a great board where we could have discussions and respectful, and it was amazing the discourse in the community kind of mellowed out, because the people coming to our board meetings decreased because they weren't getting a show. We're not screaming at each other up front, so they're not going to come watch the episode of Jerry Springer that's happening up front. And so, it's
What you've described as Hood County to the T.
I've followed from afar, and I don't envy anybody in leadership down here at all, for sure.
Yeah. No, it's pure hell here. Really is. It's exhausting.
Sure.
And the problem is that to keep running with what we're talking about, it keeps spilling over into other organizations that were fine, that had no problems, no issues, and before you know it, library is a terrible example of this, but the library board's now on fire.
Yeah.
And the Dreamcatcher Association is on fire, and Nature Watch is on fire,
Yeah.
and before you know it, the knitting club's over there. You've got calls of stab victims there, and it's like, what the hell is going on? And it kind of tie everything up, because I know we've been yammering away for a little while here. Again, this is that opportunity to consider, as you're those senior men and women leaving these organizations. Yeah, you might be leaving the organization, but you were still needed in other facets and areas of your community. And I would argue, particularly in my community, this is what happens when they all step away because they're tired of the shit.
Yeah.
Uh,
I think the whole comes when the organization leaves you, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, there's a real long, much longer. Be great if it wasn't so early. We could be drunk and have this conversation.
Really solve world problems.
No, there's a lot here to actually discuss. Now, follow-up question to the book.
Yep.
When is round 2 coming out?
Not sure. I'm kind of going through getting that figured out of what I want the next one to be like. But through the conversations I've got to have with some of the individuals, I think there's a book that can kind of the faces of the cheap seats, like those individuals that have stepped away. Because I know my unique perspective, but what are the perspectives? I'd love to see what's Dad's perspective. What are another really good friend. He was the head of the IBM China subsidiary. Volunteer fire, retired and moved to Weatherford and was a fire chief forever. And he joined it. I think they were in their 60s when they joined, and so seeing his perspective of like what was it like leaving IBM China and moving to Weatherford, Texas, like how on earth did that happen? So I think there's kind of a follow up to, in addition to starting to have this conversation with organizations and doing some consulting work, maybe with on succession planning and where this fits, or some training with VFDs, or I think it's opened kind of a door that I'm like, man, this is a lot bigger than I ever imagined.
Well, I can tell you it's a lot of fun to go to events and teach that you've never, like, I got to this last June go to Arlington, Virginia and teach at the MBS.
Wow.
And that's a door that would have, like, I didn't even know where the door was, right? And got to do this thing that was really awesome and cool and fun, and like,
yeah,
well worth the time, energy, and effort it took to do that. And I would encourage you to do some of that, because it is so much fun.
Yeah.
And there's genuinely interested people in what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Like, that you may think it's dumb and nobody's paying attention.
Yeah.
But there's people out there that want to hear these lessons, and go chase that. It's fun. It doesn't pay as much.
Right.
But it's fun. I mean, you might get a free trip to DC or wherever. You might get that out of it, which was well worth it.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
Yeah, no, like I said, I think it's actually really interesting. Um, if you were ever, as a fire department, and you were taking this seriously, it would, I kind of have a general idea of what that would look like fleshed out already. And it's pretty simple. Uh, and it's just, yeah, it's a pretty important discussion that I think almost argue more for volunteer, really, because a career's a career. When you retire, I mean, you got the bass boat.
There's some very strong distinctions in a career department of the guys that actually are into the job, and then the guys that are just there because it's their job. And I see that in what I do, because at 50 I changed careers. I went out of the business world and out of contracting and became a full-time career fireman at 50. So the changing a direction, that's the thing.
Yeah.
And but there are guys, because honestly, if you look at the community that I work in, I have no interest in that community. I don't live there. I don't know those people. That is a job.
Yeah.
Now, do I carry along the bedside manner and the stuff that I picked up over the last 30 years? Yeah, absolutely. Like, I do a good job of at least having empathy for those folks, right? But that is not work. That's not home. On my day off, the whole thing can burn down.
Yeah.
You know, I'll be glad I wasn't there that day, right? So there's some differences there for sure.
Yeah, I think like the hardest correlation would be like a lifelong military guy, either side of it, whether he's just enlisted and then stayed for 35, 40 years and, became like master sergeant and supreme and, or was an officer and ultimately became, lieutenant colonel, general, up, you know, even going as far as getting like actual chief of staff type stuff. Now, realistically, in today's environment, when those people retire, then they go to Lockheed or whoever and make money. But the arguably there is no transition for them. But it's pretending.
Yeah.
You're one of the lower star generals, because we know one of these guys actually, and he's here in Hood County. He's crazy, and awesome. And to go from a guy that literally one day can just wake up and be like, I want that mountain moved, and then issue out 20,000 shovels, and a week later it's moved, to going, I have to make my own breakfast. How do I do that? Like, there would be a pretty serious transition for that guy. And there's no reason that you can't make the same correlation for someone that spent 42 years on a volunteer department.
Absolutely.
Because it is fundamentally, at a core level, who they are.
Yep.
Yeah, fantastic discussion.
Yeah. Got anything you want to add?
Please.
I think we've wrapped pretty well up on it. I just I'll include my email in the show notes, and if anybody wants to reach out and start having this discussion, feel free. I love the fire service in general. It's I feel like I am a better person because of my fire service. Some would argue that, but so being able to help have these conversations, and it's just been an unintended I guess, benefit of writing this book. So I think thanks for having me on and for the discussion. It's been great.
Name of the book again?
Cheap Seats.
And where can we find it?
Amazon.
That'll work.
Awesome.
So check the description for all the links, and Jesse will get all that posted in there. Emails.
And I've got to buy a book too, so I'll make
Yeah,
sure
it
the
makes
link
sense.
works right.
There you go. Appreciate it.
And then, yeah, we'll leave it at that. This Matt,
This Jesse?
This Chad.
we appreciate your time, energy, and effort today, and go buy a book.